Hello everybody, thank you for joining us on our fourth webinar for Blazedpath. My name is Jose Merchant. We are accompanied by Gustavo Merchant, our managing director here at Blazedpath. As usual, he's going to be chiming in on matters that maybe I forget to explain. So he's here to support us and get more thorough explanations.
Hello everybody, and thank you again for joining. We are happy to have you here. Welcome to our webinar. This is our fourth webinar. Today, Jose will be covering part 2 of Blazedpath Suite Tools, where we will explain, I'd say, a medium complexity front-end example with some back-end support. So yeah, today example should be interesting for developers that have already entered and have begun using Blazedpath. So if you're new, we suggest that you watch our previous few webinars. They are right here on our YouTube channel. And yeah, we wanted to also tell you that we are very excited to see activity on Blazedpath, many downloads every day, accounts being created. We see interest in social media channels. And yeah, so that gives us encouragement to keep going, producing this content to help our community. And point is, we were happy to see that community is beginning to pick up. And it's only been very recently since we launched. So yeah, this is very, very interesting and encouraging to us. So again, I wanted to encourage you to ask questions during this webinar, to reach us out either during the webinar or afterwards through the forum, or if at least with suggestions for either the product itself or for future webinar topics that may interest you. We are, ears open, and we're here to support our community. So with that, let's go ahead with the agenda for today.
Yeah, any example, any use case you want us to cover, we can make a quick example and show you how to do it. They are usually very, very easy and very quick to make, and we can turn it into a quick webinar or just answer your questions. So let's go quickly through our table of contents for today. We are going to go over an example, as Gustavo said, on how to make a front-end example of a use case that on our previous webinar, we've seen how to create basic screens and how to use the routing to put them in the menu and where the routing is necessary and where it's not. And today we are going to create a quick example with 5 screens that flow information across them. So the example itself is a stepper. We are going to create an action to create something on the database. And we are going to have 4 steps in which we are going to select something from a table. Then we are going to view that information on another screen. So there's going to be information flowing from one screen to the other. And you can see how you can do that on Blazedpath. In this example, in the stepper, it's very useful. And then when we are going to repeat that on another table and another view screen, and then we are going to take all that information, and from another screen we are going to create something on a database. So you can see how you can send information somewhere and recover it to do whatever you need. So basically this is a quick example. We can do it in like 20 minutes with full explanation. So let's just get into it. The first thing I'm going to do, I already have this full example is on a Git repo that you can clone freely. It's down in the description. So if you just want to go ahead and clone the repo and follow along today or later, you can do it. I think it's somewhere down there. It's in a tiny URL. So this we have 2. So on the workspace we have 2 solutions. The webinar 4th completed is like the completed example for this webinar. So I'm going to show you how it works. And on the webinar number 4, we are going to start working on it so you can see how to do it from scratch. So just on this solution, just click on Run, make sure you have an environment selected. We do have a mock database running today. So we have a couple of registers so that you just can see how it works, and well, so you can see the full example. So we have there the compiled memory database. We are going to give it a minute, and just feel free to ask any questions during the webinar. We probably are going to answer them on the Q&A section when we finish, but feel free to ask any question right now and we can go ahead and answer them later or whenever. So we're going to open the web application that we launched on the local preview. And this example compromises a table, which right now it's completely empty. And we have an action here. We're going to launch the action. It's going to open this window, which is basically stepper. This is a very simple process with 4 steps. So this we are basically inscribing a student in an education institution. So we're just going to select a course we want to inscribe a student in. So just select any of the rows, click next. We are on this second screen. We see that the information flowed from the first screen to the next one. So we are checking that this information is correct. We're going to go ahead and click on next, select the student we want to inscribe on that course, click on next. We view the student, we click on OK, and all that information we use to create the new inscription with the students and the course on the database. This is going to be a very quick example, but as you can see, information flowed from the window across the screens, and then it came back to this screen, so we could actually do the creation of the object on the database so we can persist it. So I'm going to...
So we chose this example because we'll see how we model this on Blazedpath. It's really, although it's a 4-step process, you'll see 5 UI components, in the sense that one is the main holder of the stepper, and then each of the steps it's its own UI component. So the problem is now how we make information or data flow and communicate from one step to the other within Blazedpath. So how we articulate different, not only UI controls or widgets, but also information between screens as we flow in a use case. So that's a simple example to illustrate that.
Perfect. Thank you, Gustavo. So we are going to jump over to the other solution so we can start. First, a quick explanation of what this solution is. This is just a web application that's connected to a microservice, and the microservice manages a database. So all this work to create the microservice and the database was already done beforehand. It's a very easy step to create and introspect the tables and to create the CRUD APIs for the microservice. It's just a wizard. If you go to our YouTube channel, we have an example of an application called Quizzes Tutorials, and we go into through details of how to do that over there. So it's just basically right-clicking here, introspect, go over to input the information of your database. You can just introspect the tables you want to, and then on the microservice you right-click and you click on Generate CRUD APIs for relational databases, and it will auto-create the instructions for to manage the tables: the create, the read, the updates, and the deletes. So that's very useful. It's a wizard. It's like it takes like 10 seconds to do. So if you want to go deeply into that example, check our tutorials on the channel. So that being said, we have on our table, we have on our database, we have the tables. On our microservice, we have the functions and the object types that were derived from the tables. So we are going to be using those object types to use wizards on our web application to auto-create the forms, the grids, and we're going to use them to send information to these functions so we can, for example, create the inscription. So that being said, we are going to do all of our work in the web application. So I'm going to be creating all the screens into this folder called stepper example, just because it's going to be more tidy for this example. Basically, on our component home, we added just a header so you can see something in here, and we are going to start over our example by creating a grid that's going to launch the action with the stepper. So we're going to search for the grid on the widgets selectors here. Just type on grid if you can't find it easily. So then we are going to go over to the magic wand on the top right of the widget to launch the wizards. We have to launch two wizards, one to configure the layout, and the other one is to configure how to populate the table. So first, start the configuration for the grid. Select the object type. These object types, as you can see, all of them start with the prefix microservice because these objects are defined on the microservice, and since the web application is connected to the microservice, we can see the object definition. So just click on inscriptions, click on next. You're just going to add the IDs and the creation date times so you can see the values. Click on next, click on finish, and we have a basic layout of the table. We can do a little bit of work so it looks better. So just maybe add a title, current inscriptions. Maybe add an icon of persons. There we go. We can customize the color of this table. Maybe set the default area, and on the grid just default color. So all this section of the details are to customize the aesthetics of the table, so it looks better. So we can just add maybe paddings and
border and round
borders,
corners or squared out corners. Yeah. There's a shadow setting as well.
Border radiuses, casting shadows, so it just looks better. So our next step is to use the second wizard to tell it how to populate the service. Populate from a microservice. This is going to return a list of all the functions that return a list of that object. So it just use them to autocomplete the list. Click on next. On the argument selector, make sure to click the offset and the limits in case you have lots of data entries, so you have pagination. Click on next. We're not going to bother with the labels and multi-language right now, so just click on finish, and that would be it for this table. Since we want a clickable button on this grid to start a new inscription, we are going to go in the details and search for the actions. Click on the plus sign, and we're going to add and customize an action with a key name that's going to be add. This field is important because on the logic section, you are going to identify the event that corresponds to this button with this keyword. So just search for an icon, add, and a text, new inscription. There you go. You can add a tooltip, well, there's a bunch of more stuff. So if you go to the logic tab, you are going to see that we have three functions defined. One is the main init that renders the welcome header title. The grid init and load records correspond to the population of the grid that we did on the second step of the wizard. We are going to create another event for the clickable button, as I just told you. So just right click on events, go to grid, and on the handler action we can see the keyword that we typed on the button. Just on the design tab. So if you click on there, it's going to create the action, and you can start customizing the behavior in here to actually retrieve the information from the window and create the entry on the database. We are going to do that at the end though, because we want to start creating the stepper right now. So I'm just going to leave this function alone, and we are going to resume the customization of this function at the end. So on the stepper example, I'm going to create 5 screens. 2 of them are going to be grids, 2 of them are going to be forms, and 1 is going to be the stepper that has all of them. So I'm just going to first create the 2 grids and the 2 forms, and then I'm going to create the stepper so I can then use them to add the actual steps on the widget. So right click, create new UI component. So on our latest version of Blazedpath, we have these stencils for screens, so you don't have to start from scratch. So as you can see, these are the most commonly used layouts in e-commerce and web applications. We have product details, product lists, product search, shopping carts. These are like the most common screens you might want in a common website, so you don't have to start from scratch, and you can then go into further digital customizing them. This is like a guide, so you don't have to start from scratch.
Yeah, a template, right?
Yeah.
So it's like a template that you can start from one of these or a blank page.
Yeah. So we are going to start from the blank page today, and I'm going to call the first form course. This is going to be the screen that's going to we are going to use to view the course we selected. Then I am going to create another one that says form student. This one is going to be the one we check the student when we select it. Then I'm going to add a component that's to select the courses. So create course and page. Then I'm going to add grid student. Click on OK. That's to select the student. And finally, I'm going to create the actual base of the window so I can write the stepper in there. So new UI inscription stepper. Great. So all of them are created, and I'm going to start with the customization. I'm going to look for the stepper widget, which is going to assist me into creating the actual steps. So this is the window that's going to pop up, and it's going to host the information for all of the other screens. So we are using the usual model view controller architecture paradigm to manage the models and the widgets, and
it's basically a design pattern where for UIs you understand the interaction or the operation of a screen through a view, so the actual layout. Then you have the logic, which is the controller, but it's easy to forget or to oversee that there is also an information model that lives in memory, that the controller is updating and keeping the statuses of the elements or UI components that are displayed on screen. So basically the controller manages or changes the statuses, and then the screen reacts or changes based on the statuses of this model. So the 3-part system: the model, the view, so the actual layout of the screens, and the controller, which is the logic behind it. So those 3 parts come into play when creating a front-end page.
So as Gustavo said, as for the model, that's defined on the logic tab on the upper right side of the screen. So in here we are going to be using 3 local 3 model variables, which is going to be 1 for the course, 1 for the student, and 1 for the description. And the object types are going to be microservice.course, microservice.student, and microservice.inscription. So I have to define those variables in here. I don't have to define it in here unless I want to use it. So since I'm going to use it, I have to define it. So I'm going to add 3 model variables, and the first one is going to be a course. The second one is going to be called student, and the third one is going to be inscription. The blue dots are the types, so I'm going to type of the types. So this is our expression editor, which is going to autocomplete the information. So if I just start typing course, I'm gonna get all the object types that match that string. So microservice.course, microservice.student, and microservice.inscription. There you go. So as for the stepper, I have to actually define the steppers. This is currently an empty widget. I just dragged it from the list, so I have to define the steps. We do see steps that serve as a preview of what's going to be looking like, but whenever you just go to the details and start adding steps, you're going to see how the preview starts changing to correspond to how many steps are defined in here. You can also define the steps by logic on the logic tab and just add an object type of type stepper config. So you can actually create these steps dynamically, but for our example, we're just going to do a static version so you can see how it goes. The explanation on how to do each of those approaches, it's on the Blazedpath documentation under the stepper widget. You can see both examples, the statics and the dynamics. So let's start quickly. We are going to add 4 steps. Again, you can see 1 and 2, 3 and 4. Just edit the titles of each step. So it's going to be select course. Select the UI component to select the course, which is going to be grid courses. Click away. Select the second step. View the course. Select the component form course to view the course. Third one, select student. So this is going to be to select the student, the component grid for the students, and finally the component to view the student, the form student. And this is going to be view student. And once we are done with this, we're just going to click OK, and that information is going to go through to the main page. We are going to recover everything that's on the model, and we're going to use that information to create the new inscription. So this stepper is done right now. We can do customization of the look and feel. Like, let's say I want to number 1 on top of the title for some reason. You can just go ahead and click below. You can also do the stepper vertical instead of horizontal. You can do whatever here. We're just going to stick with the horizontal because I think it looks better. And we now have to actually start working on the layout and the behavior of the 4 screens I created, the forms and the grids. So I'm going to go in order. First, I'm going to go with the grid course. Let me close the other ones so we don't get confused. So I'm going to explain how to create this one, and then I'm going to do the student ones, which is basically the same process. I'm just going to do it a little bit faster so I don't have to explain so much. So drag a grid in here. As we did with the inscriptions, use the wizard to select the base type. This is going to be microservice.course. Add the layout we want here. Just going to select the code and name for the courses. Click on next, click on finish. Go ahead and click on the wizard to populate the microservice. Select the option. Make sure pagination is on, just in case there's a bunch of registers. There we go. And now we want to customize a behavior that's going to be whenever I click on a row I want to retrieve all the information on that row, take it, save it on a local variable, and then save that local variable onto the local model, which is going to be shared across all the screens that are on this stepper. So go to the logic tab, and we have the two events that were also created by the wizard. And I am going to use another event that's going to be select record. So whenever I select a record on the table. And as you can see, this function has an attribute which is basically a code, a string code that's going to be identifying which row we have, so that whenever I can use that code to actually retrieve the whole of the row. So to start managing my example, first I'm going to create a local variable of type courses, and I'm going to call it my course. I'm also going to create the model, the variable of name course, of type course on the model, so I can then use it across all the steps. Course of type course. And then I'm going to retrieve the information from the table, and there's a block key for that. So I'm just going to grab the block key, read records, and I'm going to store the output on my variable. So this is a list of variables we have currently in the scope of this function. And as you can see, we have two variables in here. We have the my course variable I just defined, and we also have the record ref. That's the one that comes as an attribute of the function. So click on the course. So on the read records, I have two fields. Just click on the first one. This is what widget I'm going to be reading from. Click on the grid, and on the second parameter is the record reference that I want to read from. So that's the record ref that comes as the parameter. So just type circumflex so that Blazedpath knows this is a variable. I'm just going to click the auto-completed record reference. So right now we have all of the data in our course local variable, and I want to save that information to the model so I can use it later. So again, there's a block key for that, and that block key is write model. So just drag and drop it, select the name of the model variable, which is course, which is right here, and select the object I want to save, which is going to be my course. So that's all I have to do on this grid. I'm going to repeat this process for the student. Just going to be doing it a little bit quicker. Grid students, drag the grid, use the wizards, select the base type, student, just use birth date, name and surname as the columns. Use the other wizard to populate from the macro service. Make sure pagination is set on. Go to the logic. Define the student variable so I can use it later. Student variable for the model. The name student. So on the event, right click, grid, select records. Add the local variable of type student, name my student, and use the two block keys, read, save it on my student, grid one, use the record reference to pick up the information from the table, and use the write block key for that to save on the student. I'm going to save the variable my student. So as you can see, this is very quick to do whenever you know already how to do it. And I'm going to go over to the forms and start doing the forms so you can properly see the information I selected on these steps 1 and 3. So the way to create a form using a wizard is to search for a container. So the container widget has a wizard to create forms. so you don't have to start from scratch, adding and taking out fields. So if you click on an empty container on the wizard build edit form, you are going to see that whenever you you select the base type, you are going to see all the fields. I'm just going to click on the code and the name to view. Click on next, click on finish, and I have the form already made. There is one caveat that by default, Blazedpath creates the base object on the model because this represents information from the model of this screen. It creates it with the name instance, so we are going to go ahead and change the name of the variable. So this is the course, and I'm going to call the model course and update the information of each of the fields. So just click on the delete button and select the field you want to represent. Make sure it's read-only so you don't have any problems. We are just using the ID to make the insert, but just to be more tidy, we are going to just leave it at read-only. Delete, rebind it to the name field. There you go. So on the events, what we want to do here is whenever this screen loads, I'm going to grab everything that should be in the model and fill the information of these two HTML fields, the text boxes. I'm going to set the value of the local model variable onto the fields. So on the logic tab, the event to do that, picking up the information in the model for this example, is going to be main activate. This is documented on the front end hands-on section on the documentation, in case you are wondering. So on the main activate, we are going to have available the information loaded on the model. So I'm just going to read from the model and set the information of those two attributes onto the design layout. So look for the bookie, read model, define a variable called course, of type course, sorry. Call it my course, set and read the model. So this is reading the course model name, and it's dumping the information on the local variable my course. So now to set the information of these attributes onto the HTML, there's a blocky for that, and that's going to be set value, which I'm going to use two of them. First to dump the code. This is my course.code. As you can see, you can use the autocomplete to do quicker design patterns. So my course dot, I just click on N, and it autocompletes all the possibilities. So that's very fast to do. So I'm just going to repeat this process to the students, and we can go ahead to the inscriptions grid to recover all that information and dump it onto the database. So quickly go to the student, use a container to pre-create the form, use the wizard, select the base object, student. On the fields, I'm just going to use the birth date and the name and surname. So go to the logic tab, change the name of the model variable to student. Go back to the design tab, rebind each field to the new variable name. So this is student birth date. Student name, student surname, and make sure they are all read-only. Read-only on each of them. Mandatory, no, read-only. There you go. So on the logic, create the main activate event, create the local variable, student, of type student, call my student, read from the model. No, that's read record. Read model, there you go. Read from the student variable and dump it onto the my student. And now use the set value blocky 3 times to fill the 3 fields: birthday, name, and surname from my student.birthday, my student.name, and my student.surname. There you go. So now back to the first screen we did, the home component, where we have the grid. We are going to go ahead and go to the logic and define the handler action for the button, the clickable button. And we are going to open a window where we open the UI inscription stepper we just created with all the other steps that are assigned in the widget. So we search for the blocky, open, set an icon for the window, add .svg, a title, create a new inscription. The UI component, as I just explained, this is the UI inscription stepper. So the start model, it would be what's the starting model for that screen, and that's the value it's going to create on the local model in here in the other screen. Since this is a new inscription, there is no new information that you have to start from. So we are just going to send up an empty object with open and close of curly braces. But let's say you have a local variable called my student. You just want to start with a new student by default. You would go, let's say, student. This is the name of your model variable. And if you have the local variable, my student, you would just go like my student, like that. So that would send the student value on a student model variable name, and you would start with that information. We're not going to be using that today. That's how you would do it. So the mode is going to be a window. It's going to be big size, and we are going to use an OK and cancel buttons. So if you mouse over on this blocky, you will see the OK, and on cancel events for the on OK and on cancel buttons. So I'm just going to customize the on OK button, because the cancel, I don't want to do anything specific. There's no transactions here. So just customize the on OK. And everything that comes in the model of the window is going to come in the field, is going to be trapped in the variable that I defined in here. So I'm just going to be using a generic variable called model from the stepper, and I'm going to trap everything that comes from the window in that variable, and that's defined in the parentheses in here on the on OK. So just click the model steppers, and now we have to create 3 more local variables: one to capture the course, one for the student, one to create the new microservice that I'm going to then send it onto the database via the microservice. So create new variables, one of type course. I'm going to call it my course. One of type student. Call it my student. And another one of type inscription. And I'm going to call it my new inscription. So this is the one I'm going to be saving onto the database. Now to recover the information that is going to be residing in the model from stepper, I'm going to be using set blockies, and I'm going to be using 2 of them. The first one I'm going to save the student variable, and on the second one I'm going to be saving the course, and that's going to be from the model from stepper dot student, because this is the name that corresponds on the name of the variable, on the model variable. So in here, model from stepper.course, and I have to start creating this object. I can do it in one step, in one big set, but just so you can see how it's easier to do, not easier, but maybe easier to write. So I'm just going to start it from scratch, define an empty object for this model, and then assign the 3 properties I need to assign for this object. The first one is going to be the course ID, which comes from the object myCourse.course ID. The second one is going to be the student ID, which is here. My student, not student ID. And the last one is going to be the creation date, which uses actually creation date time. So I'm going to be using a function on the expression that's available called now. This is going to be creating a datetime with information of basically now. So now that I have my fully completed object, I am going to execute on the database. Sorry, that's the wrong blocky. So an execute blocky. This is going to be executing a create inscription. And I'm going to pass as the parameter the new inscription type I just created. The next thing I want to do is to refresh the grid so I can see the newly created object on the database. So I'm just going to refresh the grid, and that's going to be the refresh blocky, selecting the grid to refresh. And lastly, I am going to close the current window. So close current. So since this blocky, if it's placed inside the on OK, it's going to assume that it's going to close whatever is opened on that event. So that's basically our whole example. So I'm just going to click on run, make sure we have the correct information for the mock database with the math, chemistry, and the people to do the example. Just going to click on run. I'm going to jump over to the console, and whenever it's finished compiling, I'm going to open the example and execute it so you can see how it works.
Also, if there is any exception, you'll see thrown in there.
Any exception, any error, it's going to pop up in here. Also, if you have a microservice, which we are going to do later on, we are going to be using the console log on the microservice to show how to use an extension, and it's going to pop up in here. I'm just going to open the webinar. So localhost 64861, 648681, new inscription, select view, select Jane Doe with the birth date, click on OK, refresh the grid, and there you go. That's a very quick to make example of a use case with information flowing across the screens that you can use to do anything you want really. Information usually flows very similarly. You just send on the model for the new screens, and then you return the model, and by doing that you can manipulate and create any use case you want to. It's very useful, and once you are familiar with it, you can do this kind of use cases very quickly and changes.
Yeah, this is to sort of to show the flexibility of Blazedpath, how quickly you can create a medium complexity use case like this, where you have multiple screens that they need to be tied up to each other through variables, and it only took Jose, well, maybe half an hour, a bit more, but that's considering the explanation. If you do it on your own, it should be much quicker even, and we see that this if you add it to the fact that you can deploy it to the cloud also very quickly, or make a change within the platform and very quickly see it on the deploy. That's where Blazedpath helps very much. Otherwise, it'll take many hours to create through traditional coding. So this is the power of Blazedpath, an example of it.
And do everything from inside Blazedpath. So our two examples are examples of how to create and use extensions. We have two examples prepared, one to show you how easy it is to connect to any library on the npmjs library. So we are going to be using this library. I'm going to import this library from Blazedpath, and then I'm going to show you how to execute this function and wrap this function in Blazedpath. So you can go in here to the extensions packages. I see I already created it, so I'm just going to delete it and do it again. So basically, you can have to create a new extension, and I'm going to call the extension Robiner. Click on OK, and this is going to open the extension field. So whenever you're done with the extension and you go back to the definition of your solution, it's going to reload the application, because this is going to be immediately available for you to use anywhere. So I'm just going to right click on the extension, and I'm going to click on Add Node JS Dependency, and this dependency name is going to be called Robiner. So when I click on OK, this is going to download everything from the npmjs library for this package. And whenever I'm done, I'm going to create a function in this extension, and then I'm going to generate the code to wrap the function, and so I can actually use it anywhere in Blazedpath. So give it a second until it finishes installing the library. There we go. Everything is installed. So now I'm going to, as I just told you, create a new function, and I'm going to call this function Robiner example webinar 4. I'll just leave it at webinar. And this function is going to take one parameter, one integer. The name is just going to be value. The type is going to be an integer. And the remarks is going to be the value to use, just a generic remark. Also remark for the function. This is the remark for the Robiner function example. So just right click on the function, click generate code, and this is going to generate all the necessary code to wrap the function. In case you want to customize any behavior, you can go to the JavaScript file that we just generated, and as you can see, it generates everything you need so that Blazedpath takes this function, and inside in here I'm just going to, you can just start programming in here. So I'm just going to be requiring the library and returning the value of the function with my attribute. So as you can see, the only thing you have to do in here, if you want to do very simple stuff, is just to wrap the require and the call, and that should be it. So I'm going to go back to my webinar example. I'm going to click OK on the changes for the library. Wait for Blazedpath to reload. And after this example, we are going to be showing you how to use one of our of the extensions that we have on the Blazedpath on the store. That we have examples for email clients, so you can actually just out of the box use them and configure the connection information. So Right now the extension is already reloaded, so just go to the Explorer. I'm going to customize a function of this microservice so I can see the console log output on the console in here. So just customize the on start event. So I'm going to execute whatever it is in this event when the microservice start, which is basically when I click on run. So on start, and on start I am going to use console log, and on the console log I am going to call the Robiner. As you can see, this is Robiner example from webinar, and I'm going to pass a random value of 10 so I can see it on the console. So go back to the console so you can see the output as it runs. Click on run. That's the database, and the microservice should be starting up shortly, and we are going to see the console log. There you go. So this is the console log of the microservice of the function that the Robiner returned whenever I execute it. So it looks like an array of objects, and there it goes, the other executions. So as you can see, adding an existing libraries, it's very easy.
So you have immediate access to any library that's listed on npm. So this goes to the extensibility of Blazedpath, how although you can build a lot of things like we showed on the previous example entirely within Blazedpath, you also have full access to everything that's been published in npm. That's a library that's working. You can wrap it into a function and import it and use it as a function within your project. So either it's existing, or you can write your own library for any special, very specific behavior for low-level, logic that you want to wrap or you want to create that you rather do with traditional coding. You can. You create a library, put it on npm, and then you wrap it, import it in Blazedpath. So full extensibility aside of the native, out-of-the-box features that allow you to build a lot of things within Blazedpath.
So thank you, Gustavo. Our packages that we have by default on the store are a little bit more out of the box. So if you click on the box in here, you'll see a bunch of packages that you can add. So let's say you want to make that your application sends emails. Okay, you just add the package BlazeSMTP for the SMTP protocol. Click on yes. This is an extension, so Blazedpath is going to restart, so you can have all the information for on all the expressions. You can start calling the extension packages. So we are going to see where to see because these are packages, they are not directly onto the Blazedpath Cloud documentation site, but they are in the Blazedpath client, so Blazedpath suite client. So I'm just going to go back to the package manager for a second, show you where the documentation is, and we are going to show you how to actually use it. And that should be enough for our webinar for today. Then we are going to jump over to Q&A quickly. And as we can see, we have a couple of questions in there. There we go. Go to the packages. So the documentation for all these packages are on the packages themselves. So as you can see, this is the one I just installed. So click on the name of the package, and it's going to open a window with the documentation of this package, and you will see examples. So this function creates so this package adds two functions that are SMTP messages and responses, and the SMTP connection, so you can actually set up the connection. So all the documentation is here, so you can read it and get familiar with it. And if we go to the architecture diagram, you will see that the SMTP server system is already added to the widget list, so you can just add it onto the canvas and call it the SMTP server. Make sure let's say the microservice is connecting to the server, to the SMTP server, and on the console, and on the environment configuration, you can see the SMTP server, and if you go to connect, you can just start typing all of the information for the connection of the SMTP. And the way to use it is just to go to any function. Let's go to the microservice, the same function we just did. I'm going to just show you a quick example before we jump to Q&A, because I think we are about the time to wrap up the webinar. So if you start writing SMTP, you will see that the functions to verify the connection and the actual send of the email are already in Blazedpath. So open parentheses, and you can see the functions. It's already added, and you can see the header, so you can start selecting the SMTP server and actually creating the message that's going to be serving as the email. So if you think, Gustavo, we can just jump directly into Q&A and answer any pending questions. So let's see.
Sure.
CJ asked, can you show us how to deploy the stepper when you just made onto the cloud? So CJ, the way to deploy onto the cloud, we covered that on webinar 2, I think. So you can, we gave like an explanation of like 20 minutes, pretty in detail. So you can go ahead and do that and follow this step by step whenever you want to go ahead and start working on your deploy.
Let me clarify that for that. Sorry, you need to create your Blazedpath cloud service account. You basically need to have this project in a Git repository, and you need to link that repository to your Blazedpath cloud service account, and then you can run a CI/CD pipeline for deploying. And you can define your environments and deploy that to your specified environment. And all happens in Blazedpath Cloud Service, and that's explained as Jose was saying on webinar number 2. There are also references in our documentation how to do that. There's also a tutorial series on how to create an application from start to end. There's 1 or 2 chapters. I think there's one chapter to the end explaining how to.
Chapter 22 on the quizzes tutorial. It explains in detail the clouds deploy. And I see you already answer on the chat, Gustavo. Let's just answer it in here all the same. Rachel asked if we can import any npmjs library or if there are any restrictions. It's basically any library you see in there that returns on a command line basis, returns any information. You can go ahead and use it. If there is any specific restrictions, it may apply, but usually it's most of it. Yeah. So
just keep an eye on if there is, of course, any licensing restrictions. The restrictions may come toward that side, to that aspect of the licensing, not so much on the technical feasibility of Blazedpath, if you're able to import in Blazedpath or not. Just a wrapper to a function. And even if it's a widget, there are ways to wrap JavaScript controls, UI controls as a widget that you can use within Blazedpath UI editor. We'll maybe covering that in some of the new in the next upcoming webinars. Yep.
Okay, well, everybody, thank you for joining us. I think we stepped over the line of the time we set up. I think we covered the examples pretty good. So let's wrap up for the day. We are going to cover, I think, I'm not sure what we are going to cover on the next webinar. I think it's security.
Probably security. We'll announce it soon, but definitely we'll keep demonstrating examples on things that are not so maybe straightforward, or they have little nuances that are worth explaining in detail how we, but yeah, mainly examples on how to use Blazedpath tools. Security aspects will be definitely one upcoming one, and we're about to release a new new version of Blazedpath. We'll dedicate a webinar to the new release as well. Many things to show.
Yeah. If you have any questions or any suggestion or any request to do examples, please go ahead and leave a comment or go to the forums and request it there. We are more than happy to accommodate any requests you have or any doubts. So yeah, go ahead and ask on any medium. We can make it happen. So thank you for joining.
Yeah, the forum
everybody.
is on our website. There's a forum in our website, and yeah, you can log in, and then you see there's a section for the forum next to where the download section is and documentation is. So you can contact us through there, or just leave a comment here. We'll be keeping an eye on it and answering comments or questions.
So I see another question from Sandeep. This helps us in CI and CD. I'm not sure what you're asking in there. Maybe you want to ask in the, because we're about to finish. Just leave a comment in with a more very maybe detailed question, or in the forums if you rather want to do that. And we are more than happy to answer any question you have.
Can provide maybe a quick generic answer to that comment, Jose, is that, yeah, for sure. So with Blazedpath Cloud, you are able to, make a change on the studio and very quickly push it down a pipeline for CI/CD to your deploy environments. So yeah, you can. There's a whole section on Blazedpath, which is the Blazedpath Cloud Service, that is dedicated to CI/CD, DevOps, and those continuous agile and continuous methodologies for deploying in production. So that's covered in Blazedpath Cloud. We'll be coming back to Blazedpath Cloud with more features and more examples.
Okay, I think we should be wrapping up right now. Thank you for joining us, everybody. We'll see you in the next webinar, probably covering another quick examples that we can do very, like in half an hour or less. And well, leave us your comments, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you on the next time. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us. Happy to have you here, and see you next time.